right room for an argument?
I've told you once.
No, you haven't.
Yes, I have.
When?
Just now.
No, you didn't.
Yes, I did.
You didn't?
I did.
No, you didn't.
I'm telling you I did.
You most certainly did
One
not.
moment. Is this the 5-minute argument or the full half hour?
Oh, I see. Just the 5 minutes.
Just the 5 minutes. Right. Thank you. Anyway, I did.
Oh, no, you didn't.
Now, let's get one thing absolutely clear. I most definitely told you.
No, you didn't.
Yes, I did.
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 No, you didn't.
Yes, I
No,
did.
you didn't.
Yes, I
No, you
did.
didn't.
Yes,
No,
I
you
did.
didn't.
Yes,
No,
I
you
did.
didn't.
Yes,
No,
I
you
did.
didn't.
Yes, I
Look,
did.
this isn't an argument.
Yes, it is.
No, it isn't. It's just contradiction.
No, it isn't.
It is.
It is not.
It is. You just contradicted me.
I did not.
You did.
No, no, no.
You did just then.
Nonsense.
Oh, this is futile.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is. I came here for a good argument.
No, you didn't. You came here for an argument.
Yes, an argument isn't just contradiction.
Well?
Theo Caldwell on In-Depth Radio, News Talk 1010.
Well, yes, it is. This is, in fact, the right room for an argument. The national argument. In fact, that we might put that on the maybe pile of what we might call this show. National argument. This is Theo Caldwell. Something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue, and the greatest hour in radio broadcast history begins right now. Now you're aware, gentle listener, we've been away for a little bit. And you are further aware, I suspect, of what happens when we're away. News piles up. We got stuff all over the place. I have so many things to discuss with you. I have to rely on my formidable editorial judgment and pick things that interest me. And what I've been thinking about, besides the happiest day of my life, the last week, what I've been thinking about is arguments, argumentation, elocution, making a case. I used to know a guy who would say, if you can make a case, you can make a living. So why is that on my mind? Well, I'll tell you. Because as you well know, we've had some debates here in Canada and in the United States. Now, here in Canada, we got a pretty good excuse. Because we got an election like 2 months and a few days from right now, okay? In the United States, they have an election like in a year and a few months, and they don't even know who's going to be on the ballot, whatever. Point is, people are debating. Now, I've had much more pressing things to do than watch Justin Trudeau argue with Thomas Mulcair, argue with Thomas Mulcair's beard, and watch Rick Perry, try to list off reasons that he's not Carly Fiorina. Like, I've had more important stuff to do, but I've kept my hand in, right? And I sort of watched these debates unfold. And by the way, I don't just mean debates proper. I mean the entire joust and parry of political discussion, of people arguing with one another. And I think everybody does it wrong. Everybody does it wrong. So as I had some time to just unwind, think about other things, recalibrate my priorities, and enjoy myself last week, I thought to myself, I got a whole new perspective on a few things. I have given short shrift, for example, to Donald Trump. Donald Trump in the U.S. presidential race. I told you he's not going to be president, and he probably still won't be president. I'm not changing my mind. But something occurred to me. There's a reason that Donald Trump has been in first place for 7 weeks in the polls for the Republican nomination for president of the United States. You know what it is? The guy talks normally. I mean, at least frankly. He's not focus grouped. He's not canned, if you will, like so many politicians are. There's a reason. Even if he had a shaky debate, the first Republican debate, he talks to you with force and with I don't know, authenticity. Now, what he's saying, a lot of the stuff he's saying just isn't true. But he talks to you in a way that, you find entertaining and engaging. Now, you look at Canada. I've said to you, here in Canada, at the end of this election campaign, we're going to have Prime Minister Thomas Mulcair. Now, no one's forcing me to make this prediction. And I'll tell you something else. I've sucked at political predictions for the last several cycles. But I just got a feeling about this one. Because, you know something? Nobody's clicking with anybody. Nobody's speaking properly. Nobody's putting their case forward. Not Justin Trudeau, not Stephen Harper, and not even Thomas Mulcair, and not even Thomas Mulcair's beard. But the fact is, nature abhors a vacuum. Nobody's excited about bringing Stephen Harper back. Nobody could imagine giving the keys to the car to Justin Trudeau. And so that leaves Thomas Mulcair. But anyways, I thought how all this is going wrong. How people are supposedly successful professional politicians are falling apart because they don't know how to debate, either literally at the debates we saw in the last couple of weeks or figuratively in the contest that is a political campaign. I thought, you know what? as a leitmotif for this episode, I'm going to go through the news. Don't worry, I'm going to go through the news. But I'm going to do it with an eye toward how people can better make their case in the public square. Because so far, in the federal election campaign in Canada, and most certainly in the nascent federal election campaign in the United States, everybody sucks at it, except for one guy, Donald Trump, and maybe Bernie Sanders if you care about him. All right? So we'll do that. The other thing is, we do a theme, okay? We do a theme for the usually music, but liners, bumpers coming in and out of the show from commercial. This week's theme is comedy. So we did the argument clinic from Monty Python live at the Hollywood Bowl. It's going to be comedy. And there is always, gentle listener, a news hook as to why we do our theme. I will get to the news hook as to why comedy is tonight's theme in the by and by. Now, stuff that grabbed, let's just finish up with the debates here, because this is stuff that grabbed my attention over the last several days. I'm not going to go in a linear fashion like we usually do. You can text me at 71010 as we go along if you're listening live. If you're listening to the podcast, just enjoy and you're welcome. But text me at 71010. You can call me if you make it gold, but I'm away. It's got to be really good. Call me 416-872-1010 or StarTalk *8255 on your mobile cellular device. Now, as I sat down here in the studio, gentle listener, ready to give you this intro about arguments, about debates, and how I think people can argue a bit better than they do, I got a text. Not to me, I don't think, just something that we're covering on the radio station. Somebody said, Donald Trump is the U.S.'s Rob Ford. And those of you listening in Toronto, you know Rob Ford, of course, the former mayor of Toronto, blustery guy, all kind of whatever. Now, I hope that this texture from Toronto, 4537, okay? I hope you're dead wrong in terms of the fact that Rob Ford actually won the first time he became mayor of Toronto. Because, listen to me, when I tell you that I don't think Donald Trump's going to be president of the United States, I also mean that he shouldn't be president of the United States. Yeah, he talks and goes on and so on. But he's also completely disingenuous about almost everything, about taxes, about eminent domain, that's where the government takes people's property, about immigration, about women. Don't believe a word that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth. But I think what this texture is saying is, Donald Trump being Rob Ford, is that just being frank, not being canned, not being focus group, not having consultants decide how you're going to come across. It worked for Rob Ford, at least the first time when he got elected mayor, back in 2010. And thus far, the last 7 weeks in the polling among the GOP presidential hopefuls, it's working for Donald Trump. Okay? Now, let's just also deal with the other side of the ledger in the United States. Hillary Clinton. Now, I've told you that Hillary Clinton, she's pretty much a mortal lock to get the Democratic nomination, okay? And whoever, by the way, we've said this once or twice on the show before. People always say, you're broadcasting from Canada. Talk about Canada. When I talk about Hillary or Donald Trump or the Bushes or Obama, I get more reaction from you in Toronto and in Canada than any Canadian politician. So just hear me out on this. Hillary Clinton, I told you a couple episodes ago that we're going to keep following the story of the prohibitive favorite for the Democratic nomination, following her email server story. I am beginning to think, gentle listener, that Hillary Clinton may not get the Democratic nomination. I'm seriously thinking that. Now, I stick to what I've said to you over the past several months. I think either Hillary or Martin O'Malley or Jeb Bush or Marco Rubio or Scott Walker, those 5 people I think will be president. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I think. But I think this situation, which is barely covered in Canada, and that's why we get the big bucks on this broadcast, barely covered. I'm looking at my screen right now. I see one of our TV affiliates has Hillary Clinton shaking hands in Iowa at the Iowa State Fair. And they'll maybe mention there's some issue with Hillary Clinton's email. Let me tell you something. From an American perspective, from a Democratic perspective, and from just an average voter's perspective in the United States, the lying, and the absolute chicanery, mountebankery that Hillary Clinton was up to as Secretary of State with her email. She gave her server to the FBI, but she had it professionally scrubbed before she handed it over. People are going to hear about stuff like this. She used her position as Secretary of State for she and her husband to enrich their foundation. I mean, so they would get donations from people with whom the State Department was doing business, and it would go into their foundation, which pays for their lifestyle. They gave all kinds of money away to charity. But what you won't see in a lot of the Canadian media and most of the U.S. media is the money Hillary Clinton and her husband donated, this massive donation, was to their own charity to pay for their own lives. So you're not making the case too well, I think, when you can't even behave yourself as Secretary of State for 4 years? When you're someone like, and just before we go to break, I'll deal with some of the other favorites. When you're someone like a Jeb Bush, you cannot gather your robes about you and wait for the nation to call, as he did in that first presidential debate. You can't just sit back on your non-lead and expect yourself to be swept into office, especially when the Bush surname ain't exactly the best in the Navy. If you follow the Top Gun reference, you better pick it up. Scott Walker, too. So, Donald Trump criticized Jeb Bush. He said there's no energy there. There's no energy there. And what I'm saying to you, the first thing you got to do, if you want to make a case, you got to believe it. There is no substitute for sincerity. Once you learn how to fake sincerity, you're golden. And the only guy in the United States who's able to fake sincerity so far, and he's faking it, believe you me, is Donald Trump. So you got to speak from the heart. That's the first lesson.
Hi, I'm Bruce McCullough. I'd like to tell you about the Daves I know. These are 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 the Daves I know. David Hoffner, he works in my dad's store. He's worked here for 12 years. He'll probably work here for more. These are the Daves I know. These are the Daves I know.
Theo Caldwell on In-Depth Radio, News Talk 1010.
That's right. Did you know there's never been a U.S. president named Dave? You didn't know that, did you? That's why you listen. That's why we get the big bucks. I'm not sure there's ever been a Canadian prime minister named Dave. I don't think so. There's never been a Dave. There's been a Dave Peterson, Premier of Ontario. We're going to get to him later in the news. But no, there's never been a President Dave. And that, of course, is Kids in the Hall. We got live and local, right? We got to bring it back to Canada. The theme tonight is comedy. I'll tell you why in the by and by as we go through the news. This is Theo Caldwell. This is the right room for an argument. And the leitmotif, apart from the comedy theme, is arguing, debating. How do you win an argument? Now, I began at no extra charge with the first lesson before the break, which was be sincere, or at least fake it. And I'm saying to you, the reason someone like Donald Trump is leading the Republicans for 7 weeks is even though the guy's lying, completely lying, he's at least faking sincerity really well. He's got some energy. He's got some passion, which nobody else among the major Republican candidates is able to muster. And here in Canada, where we are famous for our lack of energy, there's no energy whatsoever in our campaign. None. The debate, just nothing. Absolutely mute. Now, I'm going to get it live and local here as well, talking a bit more about the Canadian campaign. I just want to finish up, and I'm going to go to the phone. Donna, I see you. Hang on a second. Come to you. I just want to say a couple more things. I may not get back to it about the U.S. race for president that developed this week. They are now talking about Vice President Joe Biden, the ridiculous Joe Biden, jumping into the race for president because if Hillary falters, as I suggested may happen, because this email scandal is bad, and she is not a likable person in the first place. Canada, by the way, they love Hillary Clinton. They loved her in 2000. They loved her in 2008. They love her because they like the idea of her. But what we saw in 2008 when she lost to Barack Obama for the Democratic nomination is voters, left-wing voters, like Hillary Clinton in the abstract, but when they actually see her and hear her voice and listen to her and are acquainted with the stuff she does, she's not Teflon like her husband. She's a nasty piece of work. People don't like her. She's plummeting in the polls, and she may not win the nomination. But on the other side, also, Bernie Sanders, Democrat, socialist, self-described socialist from Vermont, senator, former congressman, that guy's pulling 15,000 people to rallies. You know why? He's wrong about absolutely everything, including his choice of tie. But he's got passion. You can't win a debate without passion. Trump's got it. Sanders has it. Nobody else of the major candidates has it in the United States, and nobody in Canada has it. But I can tell you, people who... Here's a great example. Lyndon Johnson, who was president of the United States, he went in, a poor guy, a career politician, as Donna described, making, with basically no money. He left the presidency worth millions of dollars. Senator Harry Reid, the minority leader, Democrat from Nevada, the guy's worth tens of millions of dollars. All he's ever done is be a politician. It is a fair question to ask why someone in so-called public service gets absolutely so enriched by supposedly serving the rest of us and then getting a pension for it the rest of their lives. Bill, go for Theo.
Yeah, I think not only will Hillary's email scandal sink her, I think Bill's scandals coming out are going to sink her even more with that relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, the convicted pedophile. He's been on that plane 10 times, apparently, going down to that Caribbean island that Jeffrey Epstein had. So there's a lot of stuff to come out, I believe. The media is just covering for him right now, but he's just as bad as Bill Cosby.
Yeah, Bill, you're on to something, Bill, in that there are a lot of scandals about Bill Clinton. Now, let's say you, Bill, no relation, right? But here's the move with that. The whole idea that Bill Clinton is going to get nabbed for that Epstein plane ride, which was like years ago, it's already gotten its news cycle. There's no way, Bill, they're going to come back and bring that up. So you're right. Bill Clinton does a lot of horrible, horrible things. He has done a lot of horrible things. Think about even the stuff we know that he's had to admit to, like his treatment of a 21-year-old intern when he was president of the United States. That should end your career in any job, anywhere. Right? But because it's Bill Clinton, it doesn't. So I understand the point you're making, Bill, but I'm not sure it's going to happen because Bill Clinton seems to, tiptoe between the raindrops.
It seems that way. I think that the straight-talking politician is what people want. Like or hate Ford or Trump. I mean, if they're just straight-talking, they're not talking from a script. That's what people want, and that's what the elite media and status quo connected politicians don't get.
No, listen, Bill, that's very well put. You could have done the first segment of the show with just that paragraph. You put it very well. Thanks for the call, bud.
Thanks.
All right, now, before we break, and I wanted to get back to Canada on this, because I want to talk about some speeches I saw Justin Trudeau make. I want to talk about Tom Mulcair's beard a bit more. But you know something? Let's give the second lesson to make sure we get to it. How you can win an argument, either a literal argument like the debates, or just the argument that is political back and forth. We're talking about Bill Clinton. I feel your pain. Remember that? Empathy. Empathy. One of the big questions they asked in 2012 in the United States, Mitt Romney versus Barack Obama. Which of the candidates, they said, cares more about people like you, whoever you might be? And Mitt Romney got slaughtered on that, right? Because they painted him as a rich guy and, Mormon, this and that. But Bill Clinton, despite the horrific things he has done, and Bill was just talking about the Epstein plane and all, it's just awful stuff Bill Clinton has done that should end his career, or should have ended. He should have been out. Should never been elected for the stuff we knew he did as governor in Arkansas, okay? But you know what he was able to do? Bite that lower lip and feel people's pain. Empathize. So yeah, like I said in the first segment, you want to win an argument, you want to be successful, you got to have passion. You got to speak from the heart, or at least the gut, even if you know you're lying like Donald Trump is. But another thing you got to do, make people feel that you care about them. Now, the best way to do that is actually to care about your fellow man. But to Donna's point, so few people in so-called public service actually do that. Public service is neither. It's not public, because so much of the chicanery that goes on is behind closed doors and you don't even know about. And it ain't service to anybody besides you and the people you choose to enrich. But if you can come across like you care, like you have empathy, whether you're on the big stage, like someone running for prime minister or president or mayor, or if you're just dealing with people one-on-one, if you can show people that you can see their point of view and that it has value to you, I think you go an awfully long way to winning an argument. So there you go. Be sincere, speak from the heart or at least their gut. Have some empathy and let it show so people know that you value their point of view and their input, even if you disagree. This is Theo Caldwell. We'll be right back.
One for each other and all for one. The three brave amigos are we. Brother to brother and everyone. A brave amigo. Wherever they need us, our destinies lead us. Amigos, we're always together.
This is Theo Caldwell on In-Depth Radio, News Talk 1010.
I would dearly like to call this program The Three Amigos, but a couple of things. One, demonstrably, the title's already taken by this classic film. And also, it's just me. Like, Patrick O'Neill doesn't even talk to me anymore, so it's just me. So I'm just the one amigo. Just amigo, Theo Caldwell. And there's, like, nothing Hispanic or American Southwest about me at all, although I lived there for a while. It's like nothing. So anyway, such a catchy. Anyway, The Three Amigos, Theo Caldwell here. Now, if you're just joining us, you got a hell of a nerve. You've missed half the broadcast. You know what time this starts. If I can be here, you can be here. Now, we're doing comedy. That's the theme coming in and out of the breaks. And also, the leitmotif, besides the theme, is how to win an argument. Because I'm dealing with the debates, literal and figurative, in the national campaigns for Prime Minister and President in Canada and the United States, respectively. And I'm telling you, you got to be sincere, you got to speak from the heart, you got to have empathy, a bunch of other stuff, okay? But comedy. Why is comedy the theme of tonight's broadcast for our bumpers coming in and out? Well, I'll tell you right now so that I don't miss getting to it. You just heard The Three Amigos, that comedy classic from 19-something-something. starring Martin Short, Chevy Chase, and the great Steve Martin. Well, this is why. Steve Martin turned 70 on Friday of this week. 70 years of age. Now, he's had white hair since he was like 10. But Steve Martin is 70. He starred in The Three Amigos. He's easily the funniest of the Three Amigos. Lucky day. And I got to tell you, I think he's fantastic. Guy from California, very funny guy. But I wanted to do comedy anyway. I wanted to do comedy, but I happened to see this in the news. This isn't one of those episodes where I wanted to do comedy and went trolling for a news reason. In this case, I wanted to do comedy tied in with how to win an argument for this reason. Besides empathy, besides sincerity or faking sincerity, you know what else you need to win an argument? To come across, to convince people? Humor. Humor! Nuns. No sense of humor. I'll tell you, someone like a Donald Trump, and there's really nobody else with a sense of humor in the United States presidential race, but Donald Trump, guy's at least got something of a sense of humor. Yeah, he's bombastic and he's insincere, but he's passionate and he's got some humor. And you very well know, gentle listener, forget about just being on a debate stage or whatever. If you are in any kind of a back and forth with somebody, a coworker, a family member, a cop, whatever, if you can inject some humor into a situation, you can break the ice. You can make things go a lot smoother. So, here is lesson the third, how to win an argument. Maintain a sense of humor about what's going on, about yourself, most importantly. If you're all puffed up and taking yourself too seriously, nobody else is going to take you seriously. So, have a sense of humor. And it's just, this really speaks to what I've been saying about Canada in particular. Besides the fact that none of the major leaders, Stephen Harper, Thomas Mulcair, and Justin Trudeau, besides the fact that none of them seems to have any passion, they're so damned Canadian about everything. They don't have a sense of humor either. I mean, maybe Mulcair's beard has a sense of humor and he's got all the best lines, but I haven't heard it yet. And you know what? Let me bring it more live and local. I've said a lot about the U.S. presidential campaign this episode, and it's more than I wanted to say. Because I want to talk a little bit about what I've seen the past couple of weeks when it comes to the Canadian election campaign. Remember, we've got an election October 19th, just 2 months and a bit away here in Canada. So I saw, there was the debate we had, and I've also seen some speeches, several speeches by the party leaders. I saw particularly Justin Trudeau giving a speech in Saskatchewan, in which, one thing, what do you speak in French in a speech in Saskatchewan for, right? Like, unless you can tell someone's from the government or Air Canada when they're speaking French in Saskatchewan or Alberta. Just stop it, right? It's insulting to everybody. Like, or when a federal politician comes here to Toronto and they give a portion of a speech in French. Who are you kidding? Like, nobody here is, it's ridiculous. But that's not my big issue. It's what, and I'm not going to belabor this, but it's what I've said about Justin Trudeau all along. And a lot of you have said so. I don't want to make too big a thing of it. It's not that the guy necessarily is stupid. Maybe he's smart. But it's clear his mental age is very young. It's like a kid. The speech I watched him give in Saskatchewan, it was like a kid giving a high school speech. Now, he gave it all prim and proud of himself reading the paper, like a kid in high school would be, really proud of himself giving a speech. But quite honestly, it was humorless. It was tight. By the way, he kept saying, my friends. And I've noticed Harper doing this too. My friends. Stop it. We're not your friends. We're voters you're trying to convince. John McCain did the my friends thing back in 2008. Ask President McCain how well the my friends thing did. Anyway, it's just so, I don't know, difficult to watch. And case in point, compare Justin Trudeau on the stump or in the debates, and Stephen Harper on the stump in the debates with Donald Trump, who won't win, but he's having success. He's resonating with people. And you know what? The latter has passion, has empathy, has a sense of humor, whereas the other are just canned. Now, I want to say I'm going to get to the rest of the news, but one more thing about the Canadian campaign. And you've been listening to the news on this station. You've been watching it on TV here in Canada. So you've been hearing about this nonstop, and it's the Mike Duffy trial, okay? Senator Mike Duffy, disgraced Senator Mike Duffy, however they describe him, used to be on this company, right? Used to have a TV show on here. I used to be on the TV show he had on here. Now, it was wall-to-wall coverage, the Mike Duffy trial. And remember what we're talking about here, right? We're talking about $90,000, give or take, in expenses that he didn't quite do properly, apparently, or is accused of, whatever. And then the chief of staff maybe paid it off and then didn't pay it off and then Prenti didn't pay it off. Now, it's all about $90,000 and who paid it off and who didn't. I had to explain this scandal to some people from the United States this past week because they saw it on the news. They're like, what's going on with the Mike Duffy scandal? And when I explained to them, it's about $90,000 of public money that wasn't quite accounted for correctly to look after the expenses of somebody. It's ridiculous because the stakes are so small. And I've said to you before that if you're on the right, or even just a conservative, as Mike Duffy is, as an appointee, and Stephen Harper, the Prime Minister, appointed him, you don't get away with anything. I talked about Bill Clinton earlier in the broadcast, right? And Bill Clinton gets away with the horrible things he did. But 90 grand, everyone's going to freak out. But I got a question for you, a two-part question for you, gentle listener. And you can text me with your answer before the end of the broadcast, if you're listening live. CF, what I said, if you're listening to the podcast. It's this. For all the wall-to-wall coverage that you have seen of the Mike Duffy trial, and maybe you care about it, okay? Maybe it's important to you, whatever. But for all the wall-to-wall coverage, can you tell me one way in which whatever Mike Duffy did or did not do affects you? How does it affect you? Because we in the news business, at this station, at this company, and anywhere in the journalism business, we're constantly told by our editors, by our producers, if you're going to report on something, if you're going to talk about something, ask yourself, how does it affect your audience? Okay, how does Mike Duffy affect you? How is the coverage, the massive coverage, applicable to your life? Text me at 71010. Call me if you want to, 416-872-1010, but really just text me at 71010, because I want to know. And I got a second question for you. And there is a correct answer to this one, because the other one's a sincere question. Here's one. Why would Stephen Harper call this election or get the campaign going so soon? This is the longest campaign in Canadian history. And we all knew when the election was coming. It started really early. Why would Stephen Harper have done that if he knew that the Duffy trial was going to resume and all this was going to swamp the news? Why? So that's the two questions. One, how does the Duffy scandal affect you? And two, why would Harper call the thing so early if he knew the Duffy trial was going to start taking over the news? Text me at 71010. All right. A couple minutes left before the break. I want to get to some other news stuff, okay? As I say, lots happened during the time I was away. I want to mention this explosion in China. More than 50 people dead, 700 injured. It was awful. It happened a few days ago. Now, I know it's far away. It's not live and local, but it was all over the news the day it happened. I don't know. I don't want to forget stuff like that. Like, I think if you happen to be one of those unfortunates who get killed in a massive thing, I don't know. I hate the fact that a news cycle, people's lives you lose. Also, same day, 62 people got killed, a bombing in Baghdad on, was a Wednesday. And then another 7 today, bombing in Baghdad. It's horrible, horrible week for explosions, for whatever. And you sit around just watching the news as I did. Bad stuff. Today, as I speak to you, is the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II, the surrender of Japan. Let me tell you, I could have done a whole show on that. And I am a little bit surprised that there hasn't been more coverage of that. There's been more coverage of Mike Duffy than on the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II. But that's a heck of a thing. That is extremely good news. Now, I got one more... I got one more American story, and then when we get back, I want to talk a couple of Canadian stories. John Kerry, the Secretary of State of the United States, he was in Havana, Cuba on Friday to help raise a flag over the new embassy the United States has decided to open in Cuba. Now, in this episode, you can go back on TheoCaldwell.com in the radio section. I went on about Cuba, and I explained how Canadians who take vacations there are doing a bad thing, and you should stop it. And I don't care if they're a sponsor. And this John Kerry, his Secretary of State, he's a bad news bear. He has been since turning on his own comrades from Vietnam. I don't like him, okay? I think he's a disgraceful character. I'm glad he was never president of the United States, and I hope he doesn't try running again. And they opened this embassy in Havana, Cuba, rewarding the Castros who've been torturing people for like 60 years, and with no concessions in return. Here's what I want to say about this, though. The Canadian coverage of it, and I don't know about the American coverage, the Canadian coverage of the new embassy in Cuba, you would never know from the way it was covered that there's another side, that there are millions of people who've been victimized by the Castros, that there is a legitimate disagreement to be had with America's opening an embassy in Havana, Cuba. So, folks, when I say to you I don't really care for journalism, particularly Canadian journalism, because it just is left-wing biases, this is what I mean. There is a case to be made. There should be no American embassy in Cuba. But if you were just watching Canadian news, you wouldn't know about it. All right, we got a heck of a lot more to get to. We'll be right back. This is Theo Caldwell.
To me, news is action, being where it happens, when it happens.
This is my community. I've lived here all my life. As a Melonvillonian, I'm affected by the news just the way everybody else is. So I'm working to bring the news to people the way they want to hear it.
Good evening, I'm Floyd Robertson.
And I'm Earl Cannonbear.
And this is the SCTV News.
Good news teams don't just happen. It takes years and just the right mix of professionalism. Floyd Robertson and Earl Cannonbear. They are the right stuff.
More from Theo Caldwell on News Talk 1010.
If you know that, you really know that. You know something? I believe that journalism reached its apex with Floyd Robertson and Earl Cannonbear, SCTV Millenville News. Now, before the break, I was bellyaching, as I often do. Theo Caldwell here, by the way, about journalists. All right, and I was just the example I used from this week: John Kerry, that long-faced, miserable Secretary of State in the United States, celebrating the opening of a American embassy in Havana, Cuba, and in the Canadian news coverage that I saw, including companies that may or may not be affiliated with us. All they did was show, oh, look at the flags. Isn't it nice? Not one word about the half-century of torture and oppression by the Castros who are now being rewarded. Not one. Because I got no use for journalists. Because they don't even know there's another side. It's not bias. It's not left-wing bias. I've said this to you before. It's just assumptions. Everyone they know thinks the exact same thing that they do. And so they just think that's the center. And that's just what it is. And, oh, isn't it nice? They're opening an embassy in Havana, Cuba. So, while Earl Cannonbear and Floyd Robertson will give you the full story, today's journalists absolutely will not. You know how I've said to you, journalists love to congratulate themselves. Only, except for maybe teachers, nobody congratulates themselves more than journalists do. And I've said, you see, every time that teachers go on strike, and they're talking about it again here in Ontario, they hold signs that say things like, if you can read this, thank a teacher. And I say, if you think Barack Obama is a genius, thank a journalist. But real people think differently about things, including regular people who have the misfortune to be born and imprisoned in Castro's Cuba. Here endeth the lesson when it comes to the journalist. Patrick, do you want to talk to this person about this or what? Yeah? No? Oh, we'll see. Okay, never mind. All right, I want to move on with the rest of the news because there's a whole bunch of live and local stuff going on, and now I got to pick and choose what I'm going to go to. I've talked about the election campaign. I've asked you, by the way, and I'm getting some very good texts. I've asked you about the Mike Duffy scandal as pertains to the election here in Canada. I've asked you to tell me how it affects you. Seriously, how does it affect you to justify the wall-to-wall coverage of the Mike Duffy scandal here in Canada? I'm getting lots of actually various different points of view. Some of you saying it doesn't affect you at all. I got one big text just now. I'll get to you, like a paragraph. I had one person. This was actually quite good. He texted me, asked me how, because I was going off on Bill Clinton. The person said, well, how did Bill Clinton's, how do I put this on the air? How did Bill Clinton's, dalliance with Monica Lewinsky affect you, right? That's a good point. Fair enough. I would say it speaks to character. I would say it speaks more directly to character in the case of Bill Clinton than the Mike Duffy behavior speaks to the character of anyone who's on the ballot. So maybe Stephen Harper and his then chief of staff did something wrong with the Mike Duffy thing. But even if he did, that, as a matter of degree, is nowhere near as bad as what Bill Clinton did with the intern. But it's a good question, you texter. Where are you from? 7753, Toronto. Good point. Let's see, what else? Well, I've also asked you, and there is a correct answer to this one. I've asked you to tell me why would Stephen Harper declare the election campaign open, make it the longest campaign in history, when he knew he was going to get swamped with this Duffy stuff to start off with? Text me at 71010. We're getting lots of calls as well. I'm going to try to get through those. Bill, go for Theo.
Hey, Theo, getting back to politicians, like one thing I say is actually speak comment, just say something concrete. Mm-hmm. For instance, Justin Trudeau's grow the economy from the heart outward.
Oh, yeah.
When did he get Neil Peart from Rush writing speeches for him? Because seriously, is this closer to the heart? Because that's exactly the first time I heard this, I thought of Geddy Lee singing these lyrics.
Yeah, and the men who hold high places must be the ones who start.
Absolutely.
Yeah, to build a new reality. Justin, I approve this message. No, Bill, that's a good point. And it's always, that's the thing always with the left, right? It's about feelings. And you're right also about saying something concrete. That speech I watched of Justin Trudeau in Saskatchewan, it was all kind of airy-fairy, ethereal stuff like that. We build the economy from the heart out, which maybe sounded good with a bunch of talking heads in a room, but in reality, it's awful, and it means nothing.
Well, Theo, can I make one comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
About what I think he was trying to say is what a man tried to say 100 years ago was Henry Ford. I have to pay my employees a good salary so they can buy my automobiles. I think that's maybe what he was trying to say, is that we got to have industry leaders who think of people as
right.
People and not commodities?
You know what? You might be right. And I think it's also good of us to try to give him the benefit of the doubt, because I'm really hard on Justin Trudeau on this show because I don't have a lot of use for him. But, okay, let's say that. Because I know he also said in this speech, he said, we need to talk about the things we're going to give Canadians. And I thought, as I heard him say the things we're going to give Canadians, not only is it an airy, ethereal thing, it's also a complete misunderstanding of how this country and how any capitalist economy works. A free market is not about a government giving people things, but it just rolled off his tongue because he doesn't know any better, right? But let's say maybe he meant it that way. But Henry Ford was an entrepreneur who created the assembly line and the car as we understand it. Henry Ford was speaking from a private sector perspective, whereas Justin Trudeau was speaking from a born really rich drama teacher, environmentalist master's degree, and then run for prime minister perspective. So he doesn't know what he's saying. Agreed?
Absolutely, Theo. All I can tell you is if someone much more talented with audio and video than them, if they can put Justin Trudeau's that little thing with Geddy Lee's song, it'd be pure magic.
Nice. And you know what? Royalty checks are going straight to you. Thanks, buddy, for the call.
Take care now.
All right, pal. Okay. Getting so many texts. I got to stay late. A lot of people are texting me about the Mike Duffy trial, and you're just saying, good points, all of you, that it goes absolutely nowhere near the liberal scandals, nowhere near the ad scam, all the Quebec stuff. You're right. Yeah. So anyway, the general consensus on my text board, when I'm asking you, what does the Mike Duffy trial have to do with you? How can the journalists who are covering this wall to wall justify it when it doesn't affect you? Two-thirds or three-quarters of you are saying you don't think it affects you. And then one of you had a very good point about Bill Clinton's behavior. How does that affect me? And that was a good point. But you're right. It's useless. Now, I got a correct answer right here to my second question. St. Catharines, 4280. You got the right answer. Because my second half of my Mike Duffy question, gentle listener, was this. Why would Stephen Harper have called this election when he did if he knew that it was going to get swamped? He was going to get swamped by Mike Duffy coverage right out of the gate. St. Catharines, you wrote me this. Harper called this election early, so there's plenty of time for the electorate to forget about the Duffy trial, Mike, in the falls. You're right. Because in a campaign, everybody's talking. So yeah, our affiliates and other Canadian news outlets are going to cover Duffy wall to wall. But you know something? You got a reason to keep talking and talking over it. So Harper, he's not a dumb guy, whatever you think of him. He's not dumb. He knew it was coming out. He figured the best way to cover it up is with the noise of an election campaign. It was the best. It was the least of the lesser of two evils. So Mike in the Falls, St. Catharines, well done, buddy. Excellent. Okay, I've got to move on. I only got like 3.5 minutes left. I got more news. Keep texting me at 71010 about how Duffy affects you and why journalists maybe should think about covering something else. Like important stuff is going on. Okay, I talked about John Kerry. I talked about the election. The Toronto Blue Jays are killing everybody. I mean, we just lost 2 straight here in Toronto, but we were in first place. We're just 1.5 behind the Yankees. What I find weird about this, and some of you within the Toronto area who are listening who are of a certain vintage will remember, when we won the World Series, that's right, me, Robbie Alomar, Joe Carter, we won the World Series in 92 and 93. Everybody, all of you my age and older who are listening, you knew every player on the Blue Jays, right? I'm hearing, this past week, even though no longer in first place, we were in first place, I can't name you one player on the Blue Jays. What the hell? And I'm a sports guy, I think, but after the lockout in 94, baseball never got me back. I'm just interested if there are others of you out there who just never came back. I was going to talk about gender-neutral bathrooms in Ottawa. I'm sure it's been covered on this station this week. I don't have time, okay? I don't have time, but I just want to say this because I'm sort of warming to a theme. I talk about how to win arguments, right? And I've talked about empathy, and I've talked about humor, and I've talked about being sincere. But I think one other thing you got to do, and this speaks a little bit to empathy, is acknowledge that there is another side. So when I'm critical of Canadian coverage of the Cuba situation, or Canadian coverage of the U.S. presidential election, or Canadian coverage where they always, news coverage, where it's always, the left is always brilliant and the right are always bad guys, I mean that they don't even know there's another point of view. And that's, I think, why people don't really trust the media the way they used to, because they see that. In the case of this, and I don't have time to get into this story, Ottawa schools, okay, they're going to change some bathrooms to gender neutral for, as they put it on our affiliate, frankly, kids who are still figuring it out. I watched this news report, and they interviewed some ponytailed guy from the Ottawa School Board, and they interviewed the mother of a boy who dresses like a girl, and they all talked about changing the bathrooms in Ottawa schools to being gender neutral. And you know how they did it? They said it was work that needs to be done, and we'll just keep pressing. And there wasn't one person, one voice of dissent, no interview, not even a soundbite from somebody who said, you know what, this is a little weird. Because honestly, gentle listener, cast yourself back 5 years ago. If you heard that there's not going to be boys and girls washrooms in school, or it's going to be just gender neutral because of kids figuring it out, wouldn't that seem weird to you? Now, what strikes me about this whole situation with this gender fluidity that's become mainstream is the way everyone, including the media, pretend that it's always been this way. It's Orwellian. We're all supposed to pretend this isn't a new thing? So anyway, at least admit there is another side, because it helps your credibility, because it helps you to come across as saying, yeah, I've considered the other side. I know it exists, and this is why I believe the following. I've said that the right, we are culturally bilingual. We know the other side. Because if all we do is listen to the news that I'm bashing, or read the newspapers, or go to schools, we're going to hear the left. So we know how the left thinks. The advantage we who are on the slight right, like myself, have is that we know what the other side is, but we think another way works. So that's how you win an argument, my friends. Be sincere or fake it. Have empathy. Have a sense of humor. Admit there is another side. Know your enemy and know yourself, and you will always be victorious. # Sun Tzu. Folks, this has been an excellent broadcast. You truly enjoyed it. This is Theo Caldwell. Good night.